This is Mr. Sir Alec Gillis. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm good.
Thank you for sitting down with us at Modern Horrors to discuss your new directorial debut, Harbinger Down. Or is it Harbinger Down?
It's Harbinger, but it's a weird word. So
Yes, it
as
is.
long as you don't call it Hamburger Dawn, but
Has that happened yet?
no, only among the crew.
Ah.
Affectionately joking.
So let's talk about Harbinger Down. Can you tell us about the genesis behind the project starting out?
Well, the in 2011, my company, Amalgamated Dynamics, created the animatronic effects for the movie The Thing 2011, and as the post production dragged on that film, it was decided at a studio level to replace our animatronic and makeup work mostly with digital work. And this was not an entirely new phenomenon. It had been happening for some years prior to this project. A lot of Rick Baker's work on The Wolfman was replaced with digital work. Also, some of his work on Men in Black. So that led fans to speculate, well, what happened on The Thing 2011? Did Woodruff and Gillis screw up and they had to replace the work? So after the movie came and did its business and went, we respectfully put up a 5-minute YouTube video showing all of the stuff that we built for the film that didn't make it in. And the response was pretty overwhelming. Fans were heartbroken and angry and sad, confused as to how this happened. And it started this whole conversation about why is it that big studios, are pushing animatronics by the wayside. And in fact, there are a variety of reasons. And if you wanted to, if you go to our Studio ADI website, not website, YouTube channel, Studio ADI's channel, we have some good videos up there. One in particular where we discuss why that happens. There are a lot of reasons why that can happen that are separate from quality issues. But at any rate, when we started getting this fan feedback and folks were telling us how much they missed the days of the golden age of sci-fi horror, the 1980s, we realized, hey, there's a lot of people out there that feel the same way we do. And so it's not hard to connect the dots to say, what if we tried a Kickstarter? And we will use that to see how serious fans are about wanting to see a movie where the practical effects drive the visuals. So we did that, and we became the top-funded sci-fi horror feature film in Kickstarter history. And once we raised that money, also through Kickstarter, we met a gentleman by the name of Sultan Saeed Al-Darmaki, and he's from Abu Dhabi, and he has a company called Dark Dunes, and he brought even more funds to Harbinger Down, and that allowed us to open things up and really put even more on the screen. So my promise to the fans was that I would do a Thing and Alien-inspired movie that gave them that is a love letter to those great movies of the 80s and a kind of a walk down memory lane. And we will feature only practical creature effects. We promised that we would use CGI in a limited fashion as a support tool to the practical effects. So in other words, we would composite. We would do rig removal, wire removal. Maybe we would do some snowfall effects, some lighting effects, things like that, lens flares, but that the creatures themselves would be practical, and that we would also rely on miniature ships and miniature landscapes. So that's sort of the overview.
So, just for people who aren't familiar with ADI, I know that you guys have amazing work. You guys have won Academy Awards, but can you just let everybody listening know a little bit about what your company does and are some of the projects that you guys have worked on?
Amalgamated Dynamics Incorporated is a practical effects company specialized in creature character design. That means we will make animatronic creatures like the aliens and the predators, or we'll do makeup characters like the Beast from X-Men First Class. So we do subtle makeups all the way up to 20-foot-tall queen aliens. We've worked on movies like Death Becomes Her. We got the Oscar for. We got nominated for Alien 3, David Fincher's version of the Alien franchise. We got a nomination for Starship Troopers, and the list goes on and on. Jumanji, lots of other things. Currently working on a movie for Brian Bertino, who is the director who did the amazing horror movie The Strangers, and we're doing a bunch of practical effects for him on his next horror movie.
So, with that in mind, what brought you to the desire to be a director and to take this thing on by yourself? And I see that you had a lot of writing credit as well. So, what led to that decision?
I've been writing for almost as long as I have been in the creature effects industry. I've been writing scripts and honing those skills. I've sold projects. I've written a book called Worlds: A Mission of Discovery, available on Amazon.com. How's that for a plug? So I'm familiar with the craft of screenwriting, and I wanted to make a movie that was not a spoof or a reinvention of the 80s sci-fi horror genre, but was a love letter. And I wanted to deal with, I wanted it to be true to those great movies like Aliens, The Thing, Alien, even Tremors. But at the same time, I wanted it to have an indie feel, so that we could take a few chances that maybe a big studio wouldn't allow us to take.
And can you elaborate on that? What are some of the chances and the ways that this project flourished by not being a studio project?
Well, I think first of all that because this initially was motivated by the fans and partly funded by the fans, that gave me complete freedom. And if I were to go in and pitch a very low budgeted, straight up monster movie homage to The Thing and Alien, I don't think any studio would greenlight the movie, because they would see it as an old-fashioned kind of dead topic, dead genre, and because everything in Hollywood is about what's the next exciting thing. No one really, even when people look back and try to reinvent or reboot sequels or great franchises, Hollywood tends to change them so much that they no longer appeal to the fans that the original appealed to, and they feel a little bit like a forced effort. Whereas this film, my intent with this film was to lovingly recreate those films on every level. And in terms of the risk of that, if you look at some of the reviews, you'll see this is a little bit of a polarizing film. So one man's homage is another man's ripoff. Some people don't believe in the sincerity of our mission, which was to honor the films of John Carpenter and Ridley Scott. And that's okay. I knew that would be a calculated risk. What I'm doing is I'm staying true to our core group of fans who are our thousands of Kickstarter pledgers, as well as practical effects fans around the world. And in terms of characters, these characters in the film are 80s archetypes. I had a blast writing them. I loved watching the old movies that refresh my sensibilities. But the characters, while they are archetypes, I tried to give each one of them some characteristic, some qualities that were in that played against type. So if Big G was a character who was a big, scary, powerful guy, yet he has a crush on a girl. Svet, who is a badass, is actually quite sensitive about the scar on her face. And even though she's a professional and she's willing to kill everyone in order to stop this thing from getting to the mainland, she still says to Big G, "You're a gentleman." When he says, "I should have broken your neck." So Lance Henriksen. We've all seen Lance be tough and gruff, but I wanted to give him the sensitive side of being a loving grandfather. So, those are the nuances that I tried to give it within a very familiar and kind of archetypal story structure.
Who was your favorite character to write?
Well, the extremes are always a lot of fun. The character that Matt Winston played, Steven, who is the a-hole you love to hate, and I wrote the part for Matt Winston because I know that he's so good at he's good at anything, but he's particularly good at that sort of lovable, gleeful douchebag, I guess. Pardon my French. So he was a lot of fun to write. It's fun to write for Lance. I knew Lance had already committed to the project before I even wrote the script, and I know Lance very well, so I see him as a mentor type in my personal relationship with him. So that came very fluidly to me. I gave Sadie a backstory that of having lost her parents at sea, so she has mixed feelings about being back on the ship and is trying to overcome her natural timidity, and in the process inadvertently opens Pandora's box. So I find that interesting to me. One of the more recent movies that I really enjoy is The Mist, and Frank Darabont, I thought, made some very daring, risky decisions with his main character there, who makes mistakes all through the film that lead him closer to the culmination, and he makes the final tragic error when he mercy kills his own son unnecessarily. And that is a kind of a film noir sort of inexorable drag towards disaster, which I found very attractive, and I admire Darabont for sticking to his guns. But that's the kind of ending that he had the clout to pull off in a bigger studio film. He had this harbinger bit of studio film. I never would have had that kind of clout to pull that decision off, for better or for worse. And I acknowledge that if I made kooky indie kind of decisions like having Roland, the ship's engineer, staring at pictures of sloths on his wall, it's a non sequitur. It's a little absurd. It never would have flown in a Hollywood movie, but I thought, for better or for worse, these are the kind of things that make independent films fun.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned Lance Henriksen, who any genre fan worth his salt knows, and you've worked with him a lot. Can you describe your working relationship with him and how he came to be involved with Harbinger Down?
I met Lance in 1985 on Aliens when I was doing Bishop effects. This Bishop split in half by the Queen, along with Tom Woodruff, who we later formed ADI with. And Lance, I worked with him on Pumpkinhead. I think I've worked with him on 11 projects now. And he's just the most giving, nicest person you could ever meet. He is an artist. Beyond being an actor, he's a ceramist, and he understands handcrafted artwork, and he appreciates what we do. He always has, and he's been kind of, supporting and nudging me along to encourage me to direct something for many, many years. So it was a no-brainer for me. I mean, for the past 15 years, I've been writing scripts that all include Lance Henriksen in one way or another, because I think he's a great actor. I think he is every bit the actor that Al Pacino and Robert De Niro are. He's a contemporary of theirs, and he's beloved by the fans. So, anybody who gets Lance Henriksen in a movie, he upgrades your movie automatically.
So you mentioned one of your frequent collaborators, Tom Woodruff Jr. What role did he play in this film?
Tom was producer on the film, and he was directing his own movie, Fire City, and at the same time, so it was a very exciting time for us. So our paths would cross in the middle of our display room, and we'd have a quick conversation about how things were going, pat on the shoulder, stiff upper lip, all that stuff, and then of course, we were supporting each other in the at ADI in the studio, and using studio resources to make our films as good as they could possibly be.
I've not heard of that film that you say he's directing. Can you give us a one-line pitch about what it's about?
Yeah, they're calling it a demon noir film, and it sort of harkens back to film noir films of the 40s, but it has to do with the demon world concurrently occupying our world, but they are unseen. And these are demonic characters that feed off the misery of human beings. And the lead character is a demon, and he's going through a period of questioning his purpose in life, and what it is to be a demon. And it's a very thoughtful film. And it also was a Kickstarter film. It wasn't a Studio ADI film. It was one that was created separately from us, and then they approached Tom to direct the film. But yeah, so it's seeking distribution now, I believe.
So we can look forward to that maybe at the beginning of next year, possibly?
I hope so.
Okay. And can you describe the casting process and what it was like directing actors? I'm not sure if it's for the first time because you've been an effects man, but certainly from a directing perspective.
Yeah, this movie was, and I'm eternally grateful to the Kickstarter pledgers and to Dark Dunes for giving me the opportunity to bring all of my skill set together on one project, because I have directed actors before, either in second unit on larger films or in my own short films. I've written scripts before, and of course, done the creature effects, but now I got to roll it all into one feature film. And in terms of casting, I started off with a core group of actors that I knew that I wanted to use. I either worked with them or wanted to work with them for a good amount of time, and that was Lance Henriksen, Mila Bjorn, Camille Balsamo, Reed Collins, and Matt Winston. And I wrote those parts with those actors in mind, and then the other actors, we went through Joey Paul Jensen, the casting agent, to cast the parts of Rennell and Doc, Big G, Atka, and then we had two Kickstarter pledgers, Jason Spear and Craig Sturtz, who played non-speaking roles in the film as well.
I really was impressed with Mila Bjorn. Can you describe what she's been in, or how you know her?
Mila has always been, she's my secret weapon. She, like Lance Henriksen, but unlike Lance, Mila is kind of a little bit unknown. She's been in some things. She's been of all things, she's been in Gary Marshall movies in smaller roles. But knowing her personally and seeing her work, and I've directed her in a couple of smaller things, I knew that she would really occupy the part of that really well, because this character could really have gone very campy, and even though I was giggling while I was writing the character, I did want it to be played very straight, and she was able to bring the seriousness, and she has a movie star quality about her. And I keep saying, they got to get you in a Bond movie as a villainess, because she's like an MMA fighter, and she's got a very interesting background. She's Swedish, so I wrote the part for her, and I just thought she did a bang up job.
Yeah, I really enjoyed her. She does the Russian accent very very skillfully. So
yeah, she lived in that Russian accent. She'd actually, not really come out of it, and there were people, that thought she was actually Russian. So she just didn't want to break it and then have to get back into it. So she just lived in it for several weeks.
yeah, it was great. Moving on to the monster and the effects, which are kind of the showcase of the film. Can you describe that process of coming up with a monster, and what other famous cinematic monsters can be seen in there?
Yeah, I in conceiving and writing the film, as I said, this is heavily inspired by The Thing and Alien. But when I look at both those scripts and those films, they are nearly perfect films, and I'm not going to presume that as a first-time director, I'm going to create a perfect film. So what I opted to do was to do it's a straightforward version of those. If you look at the structure of Alien has a more straightforward is a more straightforward film. The aspect of The Thing that puts it over the top in terms of nuance and layers is the ability for the creature to replicate another human being, and the fact that you could be in a room and any person around you could be a perfect replicant, and it could be either the Thing acting as a double agent, or it could be a replicant of the person, and the person doesn't even know they've been replicated. That's what's so weird about it. And it reflected that Cold War sensibility of who's your friend and who's your enemy, the Cold War sensibility of the time, which was more, actually in the original story from the 50s than it was in Howard Hawks' version of it. But that was something that is such a can of worms and is so well done by John Carpenter and his screenwriters that I opted to go with the more straightforward monster movie structure of Alien. And for me, I wanted Harbinger Down to be a film that gets to the point, gives you a thrill ride. Maybe it's tonally a little bit more like Aliens than it is like Alien, because there's some fun characters and all that sort of thing. But I wanted to hit those 80s notes and then get out of there, leaving the audience wanting more. So that's why the film, it's not a 2.5 hour movie, a 2 hour movie. It's a shorter movie because it is familiar territory, so I didn't want to overstay our welcome. And the creature effects are reflective of that. So I had severe budget limitations on this, and I had to go back to my Roger Corman days when we were making, $2 look like $200. So in terms of the creature effects, I opted not to do extensive body morphing effects where you had, limbs stretching and faces melding together or whatever that might be, because those effects tend to get a little more expensive. So what I wanted to do was to be kind of, true to the 80s, where there's things that are happening off screen, and you see the results of the creature. We start off with a transformational moment with the Stephen character to establish that the creature does transform, and then the rest of the transformation stuff either happens off screen or in cuts. At one point in my budgeting process, I realized I had to save money, and I had to cut my creature effects build money in half. So I had to get creative. So your question about what other creatures might we see in there, I did go back to the ADI stockpile of molds, and I pulled some castings out of other molds. The sharp-eyed viewer might see some shapes and forms in there from Starship Troopers. They might see, there's some things that never made it to film that I repurposed. But the trick is that you want to rework all of that, those parts and pieces, so that they are unrecognizable to the eye, to the original form. But it sort of became like the equivalent of kit bashing back in the 80s. We used to build model spaceships by just scavenging parts from tank models and airplane models and gluing them together. And a certain amount of that was the way the Harbinger stuff was done. And it was appropriate, because this creature was supposed to be sort of a mishmash of sea creature and human DNA. So I felt that a chaotic, non-specific look to it was appropriate.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and it was the gore was pretty good as well. Having said that, now the movie does kind of end on an ambiguous note. Do you foresee there being future sequels to this film?
Well, all that would depend on how well it does and what the audience reaction is to it. I mean, for me, I think that the subgenre of alien DNA infestation or infestation of the human body morphing on a DNA level, I think that's very interesting, and I think it goes back to H.P. Lovecraft, and it has been used in the video game Dead Space. We've seen it in movies like Leviathan. So the concept is in the zeitgeist. However, it is so closely associated with John Carpenter's The Thing that it can be potentially sacrilegious and offensive to people to do what we've done, which is to say, hey, this is a subgenre, and this subgenre is every bit as valid as, the vampire subgenre, werewolves, zombies. When George Romero made Night of the Living Dead, was there, I'm sure there were people who, when the next zombie movie came out, people said, don't we already have a zombie movie? And then here we are 40 years later or what have you, 50 years later, and we've got The Walking Dead and a spin-off of that, and we've got World War Z, and we've got 28 Days Later, and we've got novels and graphic novels. There is an endless fascination with zombies, and I think that it's partly due to the zombies, but it's also a very interesting. It's interesting to see the characters' reactions to the zombies. So even though the situations may all be very familiar, it becomes about the characters, and that I think could be very interesting. I mean, I could see if there was any more Harbinger down. Sadie is lost. She's stuck in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the Bering Sea, but the Aleutian Islands are a chain of islands that reach out into the middle of the Bering Sea. So if that thing was to get to the outermost island and then start hopscotching along the islands to get to the mainland, that to me sounds like it could be an interesting opportunity, like for a mini series or something, where you have lots of local color, cool, fishing villages and canning factories and things, as well as all local character types. That area is a very interesting area with native Inuits and Russians and Mongolians, and the Japanese aren't far. The Japanese invaded the Aleutian Islands in World War II. So it's got an interesting history, and I think there could be something done. I'm not sure I'm the guy for that, but I think there's an interesting subgenre here that somebody could have fun with, if you can get past the kind of resistance to or the sacrilege of stepping on John Carpenter's toes.
You are not sure you're the right guy to direct, but I'm sure ADI would be doing the effects for a sequel like that, right?
Who knows? It's not, anybody could come along and pick this up. It's not like I own, the rights to this idea.
Sure.
This is how I was able to use it for Harbinger Down. So this is how people are able to put the concept in dead space. So I'd love to see what Frank Darabont would do with that. I think he did a terrific job on Walking Dead. I'd love to see that, and of course I'd love to do the effects. But we'll see.
So you mentioned that you've written a book before. Do you mind going into that a little bit?
Sure. It's a science fiction coffee table pictorial book, and it was also like Harbinger Down. It was initially I wanted to make it, well, for a variety of reasons. One is I had a cool story to tell, but the other was that I was seeing so many movies that were relying on digital effects that just weren't cutting it for me. They weren't photoreal enough. So I wanted to make a book that kind of felt like you were paging through National Geographic. So I call it a mission of discovery that becomes a struggle for survival. So actually, it's kind of a Robinson Crusoe story. What I had fun with was not only the emotional content, but I did a lot of research on space travel and xenobiology, and tried to keep everything as scientifically accurate and as speculatively possible as I could. So there's lots of life forms in there and lots of detail, scientific detail about these life forms. And it was a book that was optioned by Sony, and it was in development for Tobey Maguire to star in, but they didn't really get where they wanted to be with it. So the rights have reverted back to me.
Gotcha. And what is the name of that book very clearly so people can look up?
That book, the book is called Worlds, A Mission of Discovery. Gotcha. And you can get it through Design Studio Press or Amazon.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. And I don't, forgive me, but I didn't know that. You're Sir Alec Guinness. So you've been knighted.
I don't know. I have been knighted. Yes.
Wow.
I've been knighted. Yeah, it's a funny story. When I started in the movie business in 1980, of course Alec Guinness was alive, and so I, of course, people would tease me about that. Like growing up in Orange County, nobody even would, knew the name Alec Guinness, so that was never an issue. But when I came to Hollywood and started working, everybody got a kick out of that. So one day I mustered up my nerve. I was working at Roger Corman's, and I had questions about some materials. I was working at making a monster for Galaxy of Terror. And I knew that Rob Bottin had worked for Roger Corman in the past, and somebody gave me his number and said, "Yeah, call him. He's a really nice guy. Ask your questions." So I mustered up my nerve, and I called. Somebody at his workshop answered, "Hello," and I said, "Hi, is Rob there?" "Yes, may I ask who's calling?" "Alec Gillis." And they went, "Oh, yes, hold on." And then he answers the phone, "Hello?" And I said, "Hi, Rob. My name's Alec Gillis." He said, "What? Alec Gillis? Oh my God, they told me it was Alec Guinness." And I said, "I get, that's how I get my phone calls answered. Total mistaken identity." but we went on to have a very good conversation, and he was very helpful. But yeah, I used that. I used that to my advantage.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned a video that was that revealed all the Thing animatronic footage. Is that on your channel?
Yes, it is. If you just Google Studio ADI's channel, or go on YouTube and put in Studio ADI's channel or Studio ADI, it'll come up. Or if it won't take long. I think we got about 3 million views on it. And we have some other very interesting videos as well, like our work on Ridley Scott's version of I Am Legend, makeup tests for that. Our Green Goblin that never got used. It was a makeup test, an organic-looking Green Goblin. So we're kind of known for our YouTube channel is known for showing some very interesting behind the scenes and things that you didn't get to see on film.
Wow, and I think our readership would love that. So definitely check that out.
Please share that with them.
Now, I did want to. I know you said you had a video on there, but can you give us just a little sneak peek about why studios might not be so enthusiastic about practical effects anymore?
Yeah, some of it is the aesthetic. I think that studio executives are not necessarily. They're not in touch with what fans are talking about. So to them, the dynamic of digital effects is everything. Things that can, leap in the air and spin around and sprout wings and do whatever you want them to. It's very attractive to them because it's exciting, it's dynamic. Whereas animatronics have limitations. And even though fans of animatronics and practical effects would say, yes, it is those limitations that make it more believable. It's limited. It's actually got weight to it. It behaves in like according to the rules of physics. It doesn't defy any physics. Real light is falling on it. Actors are reacting to it, and therefore their performances are improving. All those are the upsides. The downside is that studios have to make decisions earlier in the process in order to have something ready for the day of the shoot. So they have to back up 6 months, 4 months, 5 months, whatever, and make a decision as to exactly what that creature's got to look like in pre-production. And that requires more planning and et cetera, et cetera. There was not a lot of people know this, but some time ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, this idea kind of swept across all the studios that because movies were getting more and more expensive, there must be a way to control costs. So now, whereas in the 80s, in the 90s, it used to be that you might prep a movie for 6-8 months. Now the average time to prep a movie is 3 months. And that is some would argue it's a short-sighted cost-saving effort. But what it does is it means the studios don't have to write checks on borrowed money. If they go to their lines of credit and borrow their money 9 months in advance, they're greenlighting a movie 9 months in advance and spending all that money in interest, on that 9 months. They do it in 3 months, and they save a lot of money that way. So they would rather deal with whatever they can deal with in the 3-month period, pay more for CGI, because CGI is a more expensive technique on average than practical effects, but they can delay their decision making. In addition, when you're on set, it's faster to shoot a background plate of, your actor reacting to a tennis ball on a stick, and then you get your background plate and you move on to the next bit. That's an easier thing to do than to say, okay, bring in the hydraulic creature, and in rolls a giant robot with 10 puppeteers and 150 feet of hosing and a 3-hour setup time. To me, that 3-hour setup time is well worth it because you save money on an individual shot basis, but to the studio, they see it as a slowdown in their day, right? 3 hours on a big movie set can be very expensive. So those are some things. There's another aspect, which is tax incentives. Most studios mandate to their producers that they must shoot in a tax incentive area. So you got to go to Louisiana or Czech Republic or New Zealand or wherever in order to get those tax incentive dollars, because it can be 33 cents on the dollar every dollar spent in that place. You can that the government of that place will write you a check for spend $10 million, you get a check for $3 million at the end of your production. That's pretty attractive. And the only places you can really do effective animatronics is in Los Angeles and London. You can do a little bit of it in New Zealand, but they are more makeup based. So but you can do digital effects all over the world. There are digital effects companies everywhere. You can go to China and India, and that knowledge has been actively spread all over. So you can get your work done cheaper in those tax incentive countries. So these are some of the business reasons why things initially go digital. The reason they get replaced and turned digital in the after the fact is, in my opinion, is something I call digital creep, where the more time goes by and you're looking at an effect over and over and over in the editing room, the less the impact is. So you start distrusting that effect. It's like when you hear a joke over and over, it's not funny. What's going to be funny to the person who has never heard it before, but you lose confidence in it. So you start like saying, well, why don't we fix this up? Why don't we do, and it's a natural human instinct, artist's instinct to want to keep going and refine their work, but you can get to a point where you've overworked it and you've refined all of the organic imperfection out of it, and then it just no longer looks like a real thing. It looks like a very nice painting or a beautifully rendered, cartoon or what have you. And I don't mean to say that all CG is like that, because clearly when you put the time and money into any technique, you can get fantastic results. And CGI is very, very, it's a very artistic and very impressive technique. But I just, as a practical effects artist, I just don't want to see my art suppressed in favor of one. I don't think that a storyteller should be limited by a corporation as to what tools he should use to tell his or her story. It's like if you're going to build a house, you need more than just a saw. And I don't think that corporations necessarily are the best people to decide for an artist what techniques to use. Anyway, I hope that wasn't too long-winded, but you can see why we spent almost a half an hour talking about it on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, and I mean your passion is very very visible, and we wish you luck in all of your projects. There's a million questions I'd like to ask you because your body of work is so amazing, but I think we've run out of time. Do you have any other projects that you'd like to shout out before we go?
No, not really. We're working on some top secret things that would be premature for me to shout out right now. But if you want to send me an email, if you have any email questions that I could pluck away, over a week's time or whatever, I'll be happy to answer those. Or you can send them to David Roberson or what have you.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't mind sending you some questions about some of your more memorable moments in your career. That would be, I think, something people would really love. And do you have any interview spots that you can point me or my listeners to where they can read about those?
Yeah, we did a really nice interview with Comic Book Girl 19. I did that, but that's sort of talking also about the digital stuff. Stan Winston School of Character Arts probably has a couple of interviews with me. But really, mainly, on our YouTube channel, I think we have about close to 250 videos of really interesting stuff where we show you things that you've never seen, that never made the light of a projector bulb, or processes, things that we did that are non-movie related. Also, we've I just encourage you to share that, and you check it out, because that may lead to more questions. Each video is like a little gem of information and inspiration, and I think that's what we're intending it to be. We're hoping that we're spreading the word and inspiring people to stay interested in our craft and actually, get into it and try making things, even if it's just Halloween costumes or art projects.
Okay, well, thank you for your time, and I think I will take you up for that and send you some more questions sometime in the
Yeah,
future.
please
Thank
do.
you, Sir
All right,
Alec
thank you, sir.
Gillis,
All right,
and have a great day.
thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye.